The collar was made of pale gray metal, and it sat against my skin like something that had always been there. I had stopped noticing the weight of it after the first few months. That is what chains do. They stop feeling like chains and start feeling like your own body. That is how they win. My name is Vexa. I am Sorani, which means, in most corners of the known galaxy, that I am property. We are a small species, slender, silver-skinned, built for thinking rather than fighting. Our minds can hold vast amounts of data. We learn languages quickly, parse contracts without error, remember everything we are told. For many species in the hegemony, that made us useful, and useful things in the hegemony do not get to be people. I had been in service to Prefect Gran for 3 years. He was not cruel in the way stories describe cruelty. He never shouted. He never struck me. What he did was something quieter and in many ways worse. He simply treated me as furniture that happened to answer questions. When I stood in a room, he looked through me. When I spoke, he processed the words without acknowledging the mouth they came from. After a while, I stopped expecting anything different. I cleaned his records, translated his correspondence, organized his financial data, and at the end of each day, I returned to the small room I was kept in and waited for the next morning to begin. Sarah was the only reason those years did not hollow me completely. She was an older sorani, gray at her temples, with eyes that had seen so much, they had gone very still. She had been a slave for 30 years. She never spoke about hope. She did not believe in hope, but she believed in small dignities. She taught me to sit correctly so my back would not ache, to eat slowly so the food would last longer in my body, to keep my mind occupied with private thoughts no owner could ever access or take. Your mind is the only room that belongs to you, she told me once. Furnish it well. When Gran decided I was no longer needed, when a newer model of Sorani assistant became available at lower purchase cost, he sold me to an auction house on Korath Station without looking at me once during the transaction. I was loaded onto a transport with 16 other Sorani and 2 Drekai servants, and we traveled in the cargo hold, and I spent the journey thinking of nothing at all, which was the safest way I knew to travel. The auction floor at Korath was cold and very bright. The lights were white and hard, and they flattened everything. I stood on a low stone platform in a row of other beings being sold, and I looked at the buyers moving through the hall below, and I cataloged them the way Sarah had taught me to catalog everything, quickly, without feeling, with only the goal of extracting useful information. There were Vethori merchants, heavy-jawed and impatient, who would work a Sorani to death in their data mines within a decade. There were Crescent nobles, who bought servants the way others buy decorations, for appearance, for status, for the pleasure of ownership without any particular use in mind. There were a handful of Drekai factors who ran labor contracts in the outer systems, and they were perhaps the most dangerous of all, because they were efficient and would extract maximum value from a purchased being before discarding them like a spent resource. And then there was the human. I had never seen one in person. I had processed documents about them, Earth species, recent arrivals to the broader galactic community, not yet fully integrated into hegemony trade structures. In photographs they looked softer than most species, warmer, somehow. This one was a male, average height for his kind, dressed plainly in a dark jacket with no ornamentation. He was carrying a data pad and making notes on it. He was not looking at the beings on the platforms. He was looking at the building, the buyers, the staff, the walls. He was watching the system rather than the merchandise, and there was an expression on his face that I could not immediately name. I named it later. It was anger. Very controlled, very cold, and completely silent. The bidding happened quickly. The Vethori merchants bought 3 of the Sorani on my left. A Crescent noble purchased a Drekai boy who could not have been more than 15 years old, and I watched the boy's face carefully go blank, and I recognized that blankness as something I had learned myself. Then it was my turn. The human bid late, almost as an afterthought. He raised his datapad and entered a figure that was precise. Not excessive enough to cause a bidding war, not low enough to lose. He won on the second round and made a note on his datapad, and that was all. No satisfaction, no display. He wrote something down and waited. I was brought down from the platform by a handler and led across the floor to where the human stood. I arranged my face into the expression I always wore in these moments. Neutral, attentive, ready to receive instruction. I looked at his chin, as was expected. Not at his eyes. He looked at my face. "Do you speak Galactic Common?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Good." He paused. "My name is Marcus. What's yours?" No one had asked me that in 3 years. The question sat in the air between us, and I did not know what to do with it. I recited my registration number instead, because that was the correct answer, the safe answer. He frowned slightly. He looked at his datapad, then back at me. "I'll need your actual name," he said. "Not the number. Your name." "Vexa," I said. He nodded, and typed it into his datapad. Not my registration number. My name. I did not let myself feel anything about that. I had become very good at not feeling things about small gestures, because small gestures from owners had a way of disappearing just when you had started to rely on them. I filed the moment away, and followed him across the floor, and said nothing more. His ship was a mid-sized diplomatic courier, clean, efficient, not luxurious. He led me through the corridor without speaking, and opened a cabin door and said this was where I would stay. It had a bed, a small desk, a narrow window showing the dark of space, and a door that locked from the inside. He pointed out the lock briefly, the way one points out where towels are kept, practical, matter of fact. Then he said he would explain my duties in the morning, asked if I needed anything for the night, and left. I stood in the center of the cabin with my hand hovering near the lock for a very long time. I did not lock it. I did not open it. I simply stood there, aware that the choice was mine, and I had forgotten what to do with choices. In the morning, Marcus made food. He used a portable cooking kit at the small table in the common area and set out 2 plates and 2 cups and sat down. I stood near the wall. He looked at me and gestured to the chair across from him. I hesitated. "You don't need my permission to sit," he said, not unkindly, simply as a fact. I sat down, slowly. He returned to reading his datapad. The food was warm and simply seasoned, and I ate it, and he did not comment on how I ate, or how much I took, or how long I was at the table, and the absence of commentary was itself a strange kind of relief. He explained my role on the way to Tharsis IV, where he was heading to negotiate a multi-species trade compact. He needed translation, not just of language but of legal nuance across 3 different legal systems. He needed someone who could process large amounts of contract language quickly and flag inconsistencies. He described it as work, not as service. He used the word assist and not the word perform. I was good at it. I had always been good at it. At the negotiating table, I sat behind Marcus and passed him notes through a small link device and translated in real time across 4 simultaneous languages. And on the second day, I found something in the Vithori contract, a clause buried in the 3rd subsection of a mineral rights paragraph that would have retroactively ceded Earth's partner settlements extraction rights by 15 years. It was written to look like a grammatical transition. It was not. I highlighted it and passed it forward. Marcus read it quietly. He sat back in his chair and was still for a moment. Then he said, very softly, "That would have cost about 40 billion credits." He looked at me. "Thank you, Vexa." I said nothing. I turned back to my work. But something small and inconvenient was occurring in my chest that I did not have a name for yet. That evening, I asked him why he had come to the auction at all. Why not hire a certified translator through a diplomatic agency, which would have been simpler and cheaper? He set down his cup and considered the question as if it deserved consideration, which it did. He told me that the Earth Diplomatic Corps maintained a standing directive. When its personnel operated in markets where sapient beings were bought and sold, they were to purchase at least 1 individual if funds allowed, and transport that individual to a jurisdiction where emancipation could be processed legally. He said this had been policy for about 60 years. I asked who had created the policy. He said a diplomat named Yara Osei, who had attended a trade summit on a hegemony station and witnessed her first auction, and filed a report afterward that apparently used the phrase, "never again" 14 times. Her directorate had taken the report seriously. The policy had stood ever since. I thought about Yara Osei, a human woman who had seen something wrong and been angry enough to put words to it 14 times, and then made those words into law. I thought about what it meant that her anger had traveled 60 years across space and arrived in a metal collar around my neck on Korath Station and undone it. You filed the emancipation paperwork already, I said. I had suspected it from something the ship's system had logged the previous night, before the negotiations even began. I file it as soon as the transfer clears, he said. I always do. What if I had run? He shrugged. Then you'd be free, and I'd need a different translator. I looked at him for a moment. You're very strange, I said. I've been told. He picked up his cup again. Are you all right? The question arrived so simply that I did not have time to deflect it. I sat with it. I thought about all the things I could say, and all the things that were true, and all the distance between those two sets. I am becoming something, I said at last. He nodded, as if that was a reasonable answer, and did not press further, and I was grateful in a way I could not articulate. On the third day, Prefect Gran arrived at the summit. He was a stakeholder in the extraction compact. I had not known this when I was sold, and perhaps it would not have mattered. And when he saw me seated beside Marcus at the negotiating table, his expression moved through surprise, and then settled into something flat and proprietary. He crossed the floor toward us, and he spoke to Marcus rather than to me, as if I were not present, as if my presence were irrelevant to a conversation about me. That unit, he said, was incorrectly registered at auction. The registration was in my name. The sale was procedurally invalid. It was a lie. A careful, expensive lie, the kind that could be made to take years to disprove if properly constructed. I felt the cold come back into my body, the old familiar cold of understanding exactly where power sits in a room and knowing it does not sit with me. My shoulders moved without my intending them to. I straightened again by force of will. Marcus did not stand. He did not raise his voice. He opened his datapad, pulled up the purchase receipt, the registration confirmation from the auction house, and the emancipation filing submitted to Earth's consular office on Tharsis 4 the night we had landed. He read out the filing number slowly. He named the article of the Tharsis Accord, under which Earth's consular protection applied to individuals in processing. He gave Gran the name and communication frequency of Earth's Legal Affairs Office, which, he noted calmly, had 47 lawyers currently stationed in this system. Vexa is a protected individual under consular processing, Marcus said. Any attempt to assert a claim constitutes a violation of the accord. I encourage you to review the relevant statutes before pursuing this. He looked up from his datapad. Shall we continue with the session? Gran left. I did not let out my breath until he was through the door. In the corridor afterward, I asked Marcus how he had known Gran would appear. He said he hadn't. He said he filed the paperwork immediately, every time, precisely because he never knew who might appear. Preparation, he said simply, is cheaper than improvisation. 3 days later, the compact was signed. Marcus's work was finished. That evening he sat across from me and told me that Earth's consular office could arrange transport to any free port I chose. There were sorani communities on Vela Prime and on New Carthage, where resettlement support was available. Or, if I was interested, there was a salaried position open in Earth's diplomatic analysis division. He said both options were genuine, and he would not tell me which to choose. I sat with that. The weight of an actual choice, made by me, for me. What does the position pay? I asked. He told me. Is there a corner office? I asked. He said there was no corner office. I said that seemed negotiable. He almost smiled. It was small and quickly contained, but I saw it. Before I slept that night, I sent a message through an old frequency I had memorized years ago, and reached Sarah. I told her what had happened. There was a long silence, then she said, "Don't waste it." I gave her the consular frequency, the filing number, the name Yara Ose, the phrase, "We have people," exactly as the clerk had said it to me. I did not know if she could use it, but I had put the door in front of her, and what she chose to do with it was hers. I stood at the viewport of the ship that last night, and I looked out at the dark between the stars. Somewhere in the dark, 60 years ago, a woman had seen a wrong thing and been furious enough to say so 14 times and turn her fury into something that lasted. The collar was gone. My name was on a card in my pocket. My name, not a number. My bioluminescence had returned while I wasn't paying attention, soft gold along my arms, the light my body makes when it is finally calm. I did not yet know how to be free, but I was beginning to learn, and beginning, I had come to understand, was the most human thing of all.